Even though they died, a part of them survived. I'll make 'em unalive. It's alright, I'll be fine. Now I have to go and share. Fuck. Someone's watching. Who's watching me? Who's watching me? Who's watching me? I'm gonna scare people away. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. I posted on Twitter. Now it's time for the Discord. It's time for Discord. Wow. Hello. Okie dokie. Right. Well, hello. Hello, everyone. All right. So, I have to do a little bit of a test. Like really quickly. Oh my gosh. I need to so my Grunkle Stan voice is very rusty. I don't really have a good one. So I have to think about it like actively as I'm going along. So okay. So we are reading Monkey Wrench chapter 28, Ring of Fire by Be My Girl on AO3 and on Twitter. X. Twitter. The same difference. Oh god. The summary. I've never done this part before. The summary. Someone cooks eggs. Bill meets a very familiar face. He does. Hi, Kelly! Hi, Kelly. December. I haven't written in this journal since early November. I'm already binding a new book for my discoveries. I've almost run out of space on these pages, and I suspect I'll start scribbling in the margins by the end of the century. F has been worried as of late about me and about our work. He encourages me to publish the thesis he compiled on my behalf every time he thinks I might be amenable to the idea. In my rare decent moods, I don't have the heart. I'm already flubbing. Oh my god, we barely just begun and I'm already stumbling over my words. I don't have the heart to tell him that I will never publish that thesis, not while I still live. He compiled it from my scattered field notes, made it coherent and publishable, and I have profited from his work enough. I know why he hasn't gone back to his wife and child yet. F wants me to abandon the portal entirely, to strip it down to the chases and let contractors take the rest. He believes he can still persuade me, even now, after the arguments and the nights upon nights without sleep. He assures me he will not take action to destroy the portal without my knowledge, but how can I know that? After everything. I've taken to sleeping in the basement. I fear that he will take matters into his own hands. You guys are in for a surprise with my Stan voice, by the way. I know that a more virtuous man would let him do it, but I am a scientist above all else. Allowing F to do this would set the progress of this planet back centuries. Perhaps he is right to want to stay in the dark with the rest of humanity. Perhaps we do not deserve this invention as a species. There must be a device that will allow the portal to function safely, to exist safely. Interdimensional travel will be realized within my lifetime, and I will be its pioneer or die trying. I will not be denied what Bill promised we'd. What I was promised at the start of this endeavor. I will not measure out my life in coffee spoons. I wish I had done more. Wishing I had done more. I will see the stars of the other worlds before I die. That is a promise. Today would have marked our first year together. I have a hair in my mouth. Ugh, here we go. It's back to the fucking triangle. Bill falls in and out of consciousness without thinking a single coherent thought. I love when that happens. He's all sensation, like a baby jostled in its cradle. He feels warm and every part of him aches, and he trembles as the liquids swaddling him restore his sluggish circulation. Sounds muffled and distant penetrate the haze just long enough to confuse him further. Footsteps, the click of a gas stove, something being dragged and rearranged on the floor. He doesn't want to open his eyes. He doesn't want to do or be anything at all. But when Bill wakes up, truly wakes up lucid and sore, he is not granted the mercy of disorientation. His eyes snap open with the knowledge that he's in enemy territory, that the man who nearly took him apart at an atomic level in another timeline with Ford's grand plan is here with him. Sitting up makes the muscles in his back spasm, and he lets out something between a groan and a wheeze. Now I'm going to crack my back. If it will. I'm not a chiropractor. Okay. His vision swims, but he can make out He can make out gray walls and a shag carpeted floor and a coffee table with an overflowing ashtray. Oh my god, an overflowing ashtray! No, cigarette, daydream, you were only 17! There are rings from soda cans on the coffee table. Glinting in the dim bulb overhead. Some pre-furnished god-awful apartment 2 miles south of nowhere. It's the exact kind of place Stan would pick, wherever he is, because it's cheap and tucked away and has a dusty cable television in the corner. Something far, far too close to his face smells like burnt plastic. Alright, here it goes, guys. Here it goes. Grunkle Stunkle. Okay, that's my warm-up. Easy, pal. You're okay. Bill whips around to face Stan with sharp panicked exhalation. The guy is disheveled, but not run ragged. He wears a rawhide jacket over a dingy tank top and a pair of old washed-out jeans. He's clean-shaven at the moment, freshened up for his visitor, but his hair has grown into a half-hearted mullet. Oh my god, like me. Where did it go? Where did it go? There's a knuckle bruise on one of his cheeks, old shadows under his eyes. Familiar eyes. Eyes similar enough to Ford's to have tricked Bill in another life. Only now he can spot all the little differences, the flecks of deeper brown around Ford's pupil that Stan lacks. Bill must be staring because Stan looks uneasy. He takes a half step back, hesitant to do more or turn his back on the mystery guest in his apartment. He opens his mouth to say something else, then closes it and clears his throat. The fear rattling around Bill's chest turns to an old and vicious anger and into silence. Stan, oblivious, turns toward the kitchen with a sigh. Right. I'm gonna get you some water and coffee. You like coffee, right? Bro, it's so bad. He can't reply. I'm just gonna keep laughing at myself this whole time I'm reading this. Bill knows that if he replies now, it'll be a screaming torrent of nonsense. That it'll be enough to get him dragged off by the police and let to rot in a ditch somewhere. So he sits there, blinking like an idiot, until Stan backs into the kitchen and starts muttering to himself about charity cases. As soon as he's out of sight, Bill stumbles to his feet, barking his shin against the coffee table in the process. He stifles a yelp and flails his arms, then turns toward the door on aching legs and takes 2 steps in its direction. He can see his boots there, right there, just a few steps away. Out of here. Get out of here, a voice in his head demands, over and over. He doesn't make a third step. His toe catches the hem of his pants mid-stride, and he topples forward like a felled sapling. The carpet breaks his fall, but the shock of hitting the ground sends a jolt up his defrosted nerves. He brings his fingers into gnarled fists and lets out a low, rasping whine. He rolls over and looks down at himself, half expecting to see a broken limb or the ravages of frostbite. What he actually sees might be worse. He's wearing different clothes. A pair of sweatpants too long for him, cinched at the waist under a pale yellow t-shirt that hangs from him like a sail off a mast and seems to be advertising Meow Mix cat treats. He even has 2 different socks, one longer than the other, both a similar shade of gray. The first thing that horrifies Bill is that he's not wearing Ford's coat. Scandalous. He looks around as though it will materialize before his eyes, but he finds no sign of it. Not hanging near the door, not lying on the ground, but Bill feels a sudden chill, and he digs his fingers into his arms as his breath comes faster. He needs it. He needs it. Bill needs it. He needs it back now. It has to be somewhere around here, tucked into a closet or folded in a drawer. It's his, and if Stan did anything to it, this is also when he realizes, with a lurching sense of indignation, that Stanley Pines dressed him. Ergo, Stanley Pines stripped him. Scandalous. Bill shoves himself to his feet, scrambling to get both legs under himself, hands shaking with impotent anger and sudden ludicrous panic. Without a word, he turns on his heel and stalks towards the only other door he can see. God Lord. Ugh, God, can I read? Yanking it open with enough force to rattle the knob, and strides into Stan's dim little room. The faded stench of cigarettes is burned into every inch of the carpet. There are lottery tickets and crumpled receipts scattered across a dresser too large for the space it inhabits. A pile of laundry sits on the bed, unsorted and unfolded, and Bill lunges for it with quivering hands. Hey! Hey! I have to add a little bit more rest. Hey! Stan's shout from down the hall barely reaches Bill. I don't know what you're I don't know what you think you're doing in there, but you better not be. What did you do? Bill snaps without looking over his shoulder. The sound of his own voice makes him cringe. Stan, too, needs a moment to respond. It's a harsh and dry sound, made brittle by dehydration, trembling like dry reeds in the wind. Bill loathes the fact that he sounds more scared than angry. You're not afraid of him, he thinks. You're not afraid to be in this little gray box with him, Billy. Get it together. Saved your life? Brought you into my house? Made sure you didn't freeze? Stan snaps, coffee sloshing out of his mug. If you're looking for anything valuable, that ship sailed. You think I'm looking for your priceless male girdles in here? Fat chance, Bill calls, flinging a button-down red shirt to the floor. You took my clothes, jackass. Watch your mouth, bub, and quit that. I washed your stuff. Stan says, You're welcome, by the way. Grunkle-stunkle. I'm sorry. I have to do that to get into the character. I have to grunkle-stunkle my way into the character. Bill drops the shorts he's holding and turns, swallowing a mouthful of nothing. Where are they? What? You got cash sewn in the lining or something? Drugs? Tell me where they are. Now! Stan looks Bill up and down, grimaces, and lets out a long sigh. He steps back, and for a moment Bill has the awful thought that he's about to slam the door of the room to trap him in here. It makes no sense, but the images of it flashes through his mind like a wreath of blue fire, atom by atom. Stan just affects a bow, indicating the kitchen with a long and mocking sweep of his arms. Oh, sure, your majesty, Stan mutters, rolling his eyes. Christ! Bill scrambles into the other room, digging his teeth into his tongue, and finds his clothing hanging from various cabinet doors and counter corners to dry. Also, how do you guys like my Stan impression? Oh my god! His yellow shirt is still stained, but free of the layer of pale grit it accumulated. His road-worn socks occupy, not accompany, good lord, occupy two different knobs, side by side. Thank you, Kelly. He even sees his blue scarf strung up over the back door like a party streamer, dripping tiny droplets down the door jamb. No coat. You satisfied? Stan says, coming into the room behind Bill. I took care of them for you. Had to wash them in the sink, but at least I had detergent. Bill looks over his shoulder, too stiff and frantic to meet his eyes. He prays that what the inferior Pines twin can see of his wild, mismatched gaze is terrifying. This effect is immediately and irrevocably ruined by what he says next. He intends to say something like, What the hell did you do to my coat? Or, Where did you put Ford's coat? With as much spite as he can muster. Bill tries to spit out both at once, unable to do anything but stare at Stan with a scowl on his face and his golden eye burning. Where the hell did you put my Ford's coat? Bill blurts. Stan stares at him, blank-faced. A moment later, he purses his lips and looks away. Bill realizes, to his horror, that he is either disgusted or trying not to laugh. Stan steps aside to reveal that the coat has been hanging on the back of the kitchen door the whole time, darkened by water saturation. It's clean, or something close to it. Bill reaches toward it, then lets his hand fall. He knows the wash didn't do anything to it, not on a fundamental level. It's still the same coat, even if it has neither smelled like pine nor looked recognizable in months. Bill wonders whether the nuts and bolts that weighted the pockets are still there, then realizes Stan probably shoved them in a drawer somewhere without a second thought. Bill wants to put it on, but it's dripping all over the floor, and the thought of being wet and cold again makes him feel nauseous. His eyes feel hot, and his vision darkens a shade or two. He inhales through a sore and aching throat. "You're for it, huh?" Stan asks as the silence stretches. Good lord. Fresh anger flares in Bill's chest. He turns on his heel, shoulders past Stan, and stalks into the living room without another word. His boots sit by the door, and Bill feels the urge to shove them on his feet, grab the coat, and run out the door before Stan can string a sentence together to prove something to Stan and to himself. "And where would that get you, genius?" Bill thinks, looking down at his ridiculous outfit. He can see through the smoke-tinted window that the dry street is dusted with powder snow. A creosote bush in a parking lot on the other side of the street has turned into a charcoal smudge on the landscape, stark against the white flatland stretching away in the distance. If he runs out now, he'll last all of an hour before his brain decides it's lights out again, especially dragging a wet jacket and wearing a single layer. He's already shivering from hunger or lingering cold. Cold! And trying to stop it only makes it worse. A hand grips his shoulder as he considers this, as his options narrow in the face of brutal, pitiful human reality. Bill flinches and looks back, throat tightened by directionless adrenaline. He sees Stan looking somehow irritated and contrite at the same time. "Look! Listen!" The con man clears his throat. You seem like you're about to run, and I won't stop you. Pretty ungrateful to waste all this effort I put in to keep you alive. But hey, it's your funeral." Bill scoffs. Stan ignores him, shifting his weight and shoving his hands in his pockets. He's steeling himself to say something. Bill is just happy to have the weight of that hand off his shoulder. Familiar, but not the same. "But you know my brother, somehow. And you seem like you've been drifting for a while. I know the feeling." "No, you don't," Bill mutters, taking a halting step away from him. "You've got no idea." "Fine, maybe I don't. You're very special," Stan says, rolling his eyes. "Fact is, going out there right now in my spare clothes is going to kill you, and kill you fast. I'd rather not tell my brother that his buddy preferred dying of hypothermia to staying at my place." "Save your charity for someone who wants it, Fez," Bill snaps, folding his arms over his chest. Don't pretend you care about my well-being." "I don't. I care about Ford, because he's family, and that's negotiable." Stan says the words with a sharp inflection, but he can't meet Bill's eyes. "Point is, I've got an offer for you." "Gee," Bill says, "tell me more." "I've got questions about my brother." Stan waves his hand with feigned disinterest. Haven't seen him in a while, and all. You talk about whatever. I give you some food, and you get to stay outside. Wait, you get to stay inside. And you get to stay inside, where you won't, die. "Lying me with food? What am I, a dog?" Bill asks. "I've got eggs and cheese," Stan says with a shrug. "I make a mean omelet." Oh my god, I cannot do that fucking voice. Bill grits his teeth and looks away. The promise of food meant nothing to him a moment ago, but a specific dish, any specific dish, even a 2-ingredient omelet, makes him salivate. He'd gnaw off one of his fingers for a hamburger right now. I would too, actually. I would gnaw off one of my own fingers for a hamburger right now. Before he opens his mouth again, he knows he's going to say yes with grim inevitability. "I'm leaving as soon as my stuff is dry," Bill says, balling his hands into fists, "and I want money for the bus." In the space of a minute, Bill clears half of his... Real. It's so real, Kelly. Bill clears half of his plate of eggs. They're decent at best, but his godforsaken body is so malnourished that eating anything of substance makes the pleasure centers of his brain light up like nuclear reactors. It's all he can do to keep using his fork like a regular human. Some primal corner of his mind begs him to reach out and start shoveling this stuff into his mouth barehanded. He's slicing through a quart of melted cheese with his fork when the plate leaves his field of view, scraping across the table with a dry hiss. Bill's head snaps up, and he scowls through a mouthful of egg and cheese at the man sitting across from him. Stan, unfazed, rests one elbow and shoves the plate to the side with his fingertips. He pauses for a moment, eyes flicking between Bill's empty fork and his face, then snorts. "All right, take it easy. It's not going anywhere," he says. "It just went somewhere." How did Alex fucking do that fucking voice? Holy shit. Bill snaps, reaching across the table with the tip of his fork. "Hand it over before I start thinking of fun new places to shove this cutlery." Stanley brackets the plate with an arm, leaning forward to emphasize his words. You agreed to tell me how you knew my brother. How you know my brother. You answer a question, you get a bite of this omelet. And slow down. You think I'm cleaning you up if you puke? Yeesh. No. Bill mutters, withdrawing his fork and glaring at Stan from under his brows. What am I, a baby? You tell me. Bill grits his teeth and swallows, willing himself not to lunge over the table and drive his fist into the man's smug, crooked face. His free hand clenches under the table at the thought of it, but he doesn't move. If there is one thing, that Stan can do better than Ford, it's throw a punch. Bill knows that better than anyone. Fine, Bill says, picking at a splinter in the tabletop. Let's talk. Stan blinks like he wasn't expecting to get this far in the conversation. His gaze drifts away from Bill, and his attention drifts further than that. There's a glassy quality to his expression, like he's seeing something on a far-off shore. He's back a second later, drumming his fingers against the table, feigning casual interest. What's your name? Bill. How old are you? Pass, bucko. Why were you in that alley? I took a wrong turn, that's all. Is my brother doing all right? Stan asks, then swallows and avoids eye contact. Bill's fingers clench tighter around his fork. The real answer is that Bill doesn't know. Humans change every week and every night from hour to hour. The whole lot of them are mayflies. Bill sometimes told himself that Ford missed him so terribly he wanted to die, but that was an empty comfort when the floor of a bus station was leaching the warmth from your skin. There was also the terrible gnawing possibility that it wasn't true, that this timeline's Ford was already burying the mess Bill made and moving on with his life, with his work, with Fiddleford. That he was happy without Bill already. Son of a bitch! He's dead, isn't he? He's not dead. Wait, fuck. He's not dead, is he? Stan asks. The sound that erupts from Bill's throat is too sharp and strange to be called a laugh. Bill rubs his temple with 2 fingers and looks away. He contemplates telling Stan that Ford is dead just to see what the guy does. Oh, please. Sixer's the luckiest human I've ever met. He could jump into a cobra nest and come back with nothing but a few bruises and some field notes. So he's fine? Hey, he's doing a hell of a lot better than you. If Stan is offended, he doesn't show it. He sighs and slides the eggs back toward Bill, who snatches the plate with enough force to scratch the unvarnished table. The omelet is starting to get cold, which Bill would care about if he weren't demolishing it like a hyena unleashed on a zebra carcass. Vigius, Stan says. He always has been. I keep changing it because I keep losing it. After a single minute, Bill loses control of the plate again. He lets out a huff under his breath and glares at Stan, chewing with audible and excessive force. Right, next question. Seriously, slow down with that, Stan huffs. How do you know, my brother? Bill stiffens. Damn, he really should have come up with something. Anything. He tries to remember the lie he and Ford concocted when Fiddleford first arrived, but thinking about Fiddleford makes Bill's blood hot and his gorge rise. Something about West Coast Tech and Al Pacino and a pile of doctorates. His mind betrays him too, as whatever part of it controls deception is drowned out by the desire for more food. I owe him, Bill mutters, face warming at the strange truth of it. So I figured I'd stick around, help out, for his sake. Stan's eyebrows shoot up. Bill starts to reach for the plate, but Stan nudges it further out of his reach. What'd he do? Save your life? Pay some debts? Something like that. Don't get it twisted. I'm more than made up for it. Did a lot for the guy. How long have you known him? A while, Bill says after a brief but heavy pause. Stan's eyes narrow. Get specific, wise guy. A deal is a deal. I answer your stupid questions. You give me my food. Hey, these look good, Stan says lazily, lifting a forkful. I outdid myself. Sure would be a shame if you didn't get any more of them. Bill's fists clench beneath the table, hard enough that his knuckles ache. For the second time in the span of the last half hour, he considers launching himself at Stan with whatever strength a half a plate of eggs and a half a cup of coffee has given him, tackling him to the floor, feeling the shock of adrenaline in his brain. I could get the jump on him. Bill thinks. He doesn't look so good. Maybe... He catches a pale reflection of himself in the face of a broken clock on the wall, and the sight is enough to kill the plan in its cradle. The sheer toll even a few weeks of hardship have on a human face is absurd. It looks older than it should, hollowed by nights on the road and days without food. Someone could kill this vessel. Kill him. With all the effort it took to bring down a house cat. A year, Bill snaps, defeated. A year to the day, con man. Happy? Saying it out loud makes Bill's voice stick in his throat for a moment. Despite the churning in his gut, the hunger that drags its claws down the walls of his stomach, it takes him a moment to register that the plate of eggs is in front of him again. For a moment, he remembers the axolotl that drifted through his dreams a few nights before everything came crashing down around him. The memory fades a moment later. That's That's not that long, Stan says, brow furrowed. Bill chews until the eggs crumble to particles in his mouth, eyes unfocused. Trust me, it's longer than you think, he murmurs. Stan leans back in his chair with a sigh. He doesn't sound satisfied, but he's still curious. He takes a sip of his cold coffee and shifts in his seat. So, you told me. So. So, he told me. Fuck. 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 So, he told you about me, Stan says with a rueful quirk of his lip. Yeah? What makes you think that? You called me a con man. Stan shrugs and looks away. You've been working with my brother for a year. Stan's the reason that he told you about me. Bill doesn't like the way Stan emphasizes working with, but he's too busy chewing to start another argument. Sure I did. Sure he did. I know all about you, Stan Pines. Bro. For the first time, Stan looks a little bit unnerved. Bill relishes it. Before the man can get a word in, he presses onward. He only brought you up because he heard your voice on the radio. Some phone psychic scam you were running, Bill continues. He said he was going to call and pretend to be the IRS. Scare the hell out of you. You're lucky he's a nice guy. Or maybe he couldn't just be bothered. Or maybe he just couldn't be bothered. Did you see that? My phone just fell out of my hand. Okay. Bruh. It fucking scrolled down. Oh, and he never talked about you after that, if you were curious. A flicker of old hardened pain passes over Stan's face, but it's all too brief. Bill holds on to it, even as he remembers the dreams Ford had in which Stan appeared. Always young and free and at a distance. Kelly, you're cracking me up. Those don't mean anything, Bill thinks, even as the malicious happiness in his chest sours and fades. Well, would have been nice to hear from him, Stan says. But hey, he's too busy becoming the next Alfred Einstein or whatever. You know, he'd already be in the history books if you didn't ruin his life, Bill mutters. He's goading, looking for a reaction, anything that'll stick under Stan's skin, something to feel like he has an upper hand again. The silence is longer and thicker, like the moment between a flash of lightning on the horizon and a roll of far-off thunder. Stan presses his lips together and a shadow passes over his face that delights Bill. The glee turns to something more anxious than when the man moves, shifting forward in his chair as though he's about to reach across the table. Bill braces like he's going to be bashed in the head with the plate, then despises himself for the reaction. You're not afraid of this clown, he thinks. Never have been. Look him in the eyes. He's just another animal. Stan exhales through his nose and looks at Bill, gaze level, one brow raised. So, he told you about that, huh? Stan says, Figures. I wouldn't like me either, if I was him. Trust me, he doesn't. See, I know I screwed up, pal. What I want to know, Stan interrupts himself, taking a long sip of coffee, eyes locked on Bill, is how you screwed up. Hi, Buddy Keys. Bill stiffens and sets his fork down with a heavy clank. I didn't screw anything up. Then why aren't you here with him, wherever he is? I didn't do anything, Bill says, the lie heavy in his throat. You don't know what you're talking about. Me? So he kicked you out for no reason? I left on my own. Bill snaps, springing to his feet hard enough to force his chair. Because Sixer listened to some hillbilly over me after everything I'd done for him, after everything we'd done together. You'd think I'd stick around after an insult like that? I had to hit the road. That really echoed around my house. Oh my god. Bill stands, breathing hard, seething with all the force his body can muster. He can feel his fire simmering just under his skin, seconds from bursting through. It's all he can do not to burn this awful apartment to the ground. He really would, except that he's still in it, and the thought of being surrounded by blue fire with Stanley Pines makes him feel sick, downright nauseous, as a matter of fact. Sure, pal, Stan says, watching Bill with a dubious, infuriating expression. I'll take your word for it. He needs me. Bill's stomach cramps and his vision blurs and warps around some impossible axis. You think you know him the way I do? I'm his goddamn muse. He's up there in Oregon right now, missing me like an amputated limb. He's not. You don't. Thing's right over there, Stan says with a jerk of his thumb. Bill lurches the 4 steps to the sink just in time to vomit his eggs into the drain. He groans, hands trembling, as he braces himself on the edge and blinks into the haze of droplets kicked up by the faucet. The halo of hair surrounding his vision like a vignette is pulled away, and Bill doesn't realize that Stan is holding it back for another 10 seconds of worthless dry heaving. Let go, Bill says, legs weak and vision half darkened. I don't need you. Yeah, you don't, Stan says. I'm just minimizing the damage here. You ever try to get puke out of shag carpet? Stuff of nightmares. I'll show you a nightmare, Bill mumbles. A moment later, his strength fails him and he lets his head rest on the edge of the sink with a groan. Told ya. Wait, fuck. That was the wrong voice. Told ya! Stan says, moving away. Look at that! 4 eggs right down the drain. You're lucky those were stolen. He worshipped me, Bill whispers. Me! Of all... I'm making another omelet. Stan announces. That scene is so fucking funny. Oh my god. I need to drink some water. Oh my lord. Stan announces as though the last few minutes of conversation didn't happen. I get half of it this time. And you slow down, because I'm going to start charging you if you waste my food. Bill doesn't reply. He stays by the sink, forehead pressed to the cold metal rim, listening to his own heartbeat in his ears. His eyes feel hot in their sockets, and when he lifts a wrist to his face, he is horrified, but not shocked, not anymore, to realize that his tear ducts are functional. Oh, he's crying. The poor baby triangle's crying. More cheese, Bill demands, miserable. More salt. Those cost. Sure, why not? Stan says. As the oil starts to sputter in the skillet, Bill stands and manages, through some contrivance of gravity, to stagger over to his chair. He drinks more coffee, relieved to have anything that'll wash out the taste of stomach acid. When he sits, he does his best to wipe whatever remains on his face with the collar of the stupid yellow Meow Mix shirt, blinking until his vision resolves into something he can identify. His mouth waters as the smell of melting cheese fills the air again, and he makes a deliberate effort to look away from Stan. He casts his gaze around the living room, to the green-gray couch and brown-gray carpet, to the picture of someone else's family forgotten on the wall. So he lost it, a little, in front of Stanley Pines. What does it matter? He's not going to be sticking around. Stan will forget all of this in a week. Bill has plans, and lots of them. It'll all be over soon. So, Ford's in the guys, Stan asks. Ha! Knew it. Bill presses his hands into his face and wills himself to bash his face against the table. He wills himself not to bash his face against the table. Over the next few hours, I think I'm like halfway through. Over the next few hours, Stan wrings a lot of information out of Bill. Nothing real, or Bill's too smart for that. He tells Stan about their project in broad strokes, and he never uses the word portal or anything close to it. At one point, he uses the phrase, some big sciencey thing, which Stan accepts at face value with a nod. He's drinking while he watches Bill, now with an old box television playing the Gong Show in front of him, and the light is harsh and static white on his face. It's a marvel and a relief how little he looks like Ford right now. It was, I don't know, an alien bug, big and pasty like you. Bill takes a sip of his own drink, wrinkles his nose, and sinks deeper into the cushions. Uh-huh, Stan says, changing the channel to some nature documentary. That was when Fordsy and I were looking for supplies for the science thing. We got more than we bargained for. What can I say? I took care of it for him. Torched it with some leftover tech on board. It was like, have you seen Alien? Nah, I only watch television. Me and Ford used to love creature features, though. Creature features? Yeah, you know, those monsters like the Crawling Eye and Attack of the Crab Monsters? That one scared me shitless until Ford debunked it for me. Debunked? Bunkle? Grunkle Stunkle wins the Oh, right. I'm sorry, Kelly. Oh, right, Bill says, examining his nails through narrowed eyes. I heard you were really captivated. Heard you were really captivated by Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Stan's laugh is startled and short. What the hell? When did he tell you that story? We were kids. Bill realizes with a flash of embarrassment that he didn't hear that story from Ford. This was something he'd found in Stanley's mind in another lifetime. Rifling through old memories and regrets, Stan, 8 years old, had dragged Ford into their shared bedroom by the arm and forced him to witness a wedding that involved Stan doodling a ring on the actress in the poster's finger while a semi-domesticated possum officiated. Ford had insisted, little arms folded across his chest, that this had no legal legitimacy. He remained for the ceremony anyway. Oh my god. Geez, that's adorable, Bill thinks with a terrible lack of sarcasm. Why should I know? Bill asks, drawing his knees up to his chin. He'd tell me anything. You were that close, huh? Bill's fingers tighten on the can, enough to crinkle the aluminum. He digs his teeth into the edge of his tongue and rotates to face Stan, fighting the sagging armchair and his own exhaustion. Arr! That close, Bill says with a crooked half smile. You watch! He'll come crawling back to me when he realizes what a mistake he's made. Stan raises an eyebrow, which makes Bill's throat go dry all at once. The anger in his chest is hot enough to blacken his ribs. Bill thinks about revealing himself now, giving this crook a show, lashing out with a line of blue fire to ignite the pillow at the con man's back. Stan wouldn't have this kind of attitude if he knew a demon was sitting mere feet from him. Or maybe he would. Bill doesn't know what he'd do if he set the curtains ablaze and Stanley reacted with that infuriating, pointed disinterest he'd cultivated as an older man. A reaction like that might, under the circumstances, be the thing that finally made Bill immolate himself. Stan has no sense of reverence, no concept of worship or authority higher than $100 bill. He doesn't deserve what Bill could offer him, not now and not in any other timeline. Fucking drama queen. In any case, Bill is not afraid to reveal himself. He's not afraid of his devotee's inferior copy, and the cold feeling he gets in his fingers when Stan meets his eyes is just the result of a drafty apartment. He's being shrewd by not killing this guy where he stands. End of story. You really think he'll come back for you? Stan asks. I know so. Bill sinks back, pulls his feet up on the chair. I've got time in spades, more than you could understand. Sure, Stan says with a subtle roll of his eyes. After a moment, he looks contemplative. He glances at Bill twice, jaw moving like he wants to say something. It's furtive, which isn't like him, and Bill feels a mingling of nervous energy and old disgust in his chest. What? He says, throwing his hands in the air, knocking over his empty can. Sheesh! Spit it out! This is like watching a fish suffocate on the beach, and not in the funny way. It's just that, well, you know, Stan says, scratching the back of his neck. I thought he'd come around after I too. Look how that turned out for me. Bill freezes. He feels his heart beating in uneven time in his chest, his throat tightening. He shoves himself forward, nails digging into the smoke-scented mangy velvet of the chair, lip curling. What happened between me and Stanford is nothing like what happened between you two, Bill says. Nothing! You derailed his life to go treasure hunting, to read comic books and eat candy bars and wallow in your childhood fantasies. I did nothing compared to my big teenage fuck-up, Stan says with an exhalation that sounds like rueful laughter. Yeah, I remember. I'll take your word for it. For another few minutes of the old muffled nature documentary's runtime, Bill stares at Stan. He waits for a reaction for the guy to explode on him like the big overgrown ape he is. But the man just turns back to the TV and takes a long contemplative sip of his beer. His eyes are dark and listless, and Bill catches a flicker of resentment in their depths and the crease between his brows. Apathy swallows it before it can germinate. He'll hear me out, Bill says, sitting back down in his chair with a huff. You watch! I've got all the time I need! A memory flickers in his mind. It's the remnant of a nightmare buried in his mind like an old splinter. The Ford he failed to convince a diamond in his hand forever. He knows it's a nightmare now, feels the weight of it in his stomach. You're not gonna let that happen, he tells himself, wrapping his hands around his arms. You can't. You won't do that to him. Just a bad dream. So what happened? So what happened exactly? Stan sips his beer. You cheat on him? Bill lets out a sharp, affronted laugh. What? Well, did you? There is no one. Bill blinks, remembering himself. No, I didn't. That's a stupid question. Good. Would have had to kick your ass. Bill flinches away from the guy's pointed finger. Like hell you could, he mutters. Like hell I couldn't. You ain't nothing. If you hadn't been crying in that alleyway, I would have thought you were dead. I would have thought you were already a dead body. I wasn't crying, Bill spits, blood draining from his face. That's not true. Bro. The look on Stan's face tells him that it is true, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Bill imagines crawling into some faraway hole to die with a sudden wistfulness. The thought that Stan found him bawling like a little lost child in an alleyway makes him want to throw up again, but his stomach remains stubbornly settled. Hey, you don't have to tell me. Just curious. Stan shrugs. I mean, you do have to tell me if you want another beer. Conditions of your stay. Bill curls himself into a tighter ball. On screen, a swan drifts alone in the center of a lake, turning aimless circles under some old British man's serene narration. Swans are as pretty as they are vicious. Bill's always been a fan of the species. God. His old college roommate got into his head. Bill spits each word like individual obscenity. Told him things about me. Was he lying? Stan asks. Yeah. Bill lies, staring down at the shag carpet. Of course he was. That's rough, buddy. That's rough, buddy. Stan's unreadable eyes drift back to Bill. Sorry. Sorry. I've lost the fucking gruff. I don't need your pity. Bill mumbles, exhaustion falling over him in a sudden wave. I'm not like you. Silence save for the hum and babbling of the television. Bill sinks into the chair with a sigh. He yelps when it tips back with a rusty creak, then pops into a reclining position. Stan whistles as Bill rights himself, flailing for purchase on the air fabric. Sure aren't, Stan says. I couldn't get that thing unstuck for the life of me. Bill admits defeat and sinks back down into the recliner, arms draped over the sides, legs akimbo on the footrest. Stan is chuckling that lower smoker's laugh that peters out into coughs, and Bill doesn't have the strength to move. He stares up at the popcorn gray of the ceiling, the frozen field of black and white and gray, and wishes he didn't have to feel anything at all. He stays there for a while. At some point, he hears Stan get up and walk into the kitchen. He blinks, and the guy is back, cracking open another can of something. Bill catches a whiff of sugar. Pit Cola? Joe Pitt? And turns his head to look at the guy again. Why'd you pick me up? Bill mutters. Stan grunts halfway through a long sip, eyes flicking to Bill from the screen. I said, why'd you pick me up? As in off the ground in the alley, Bill asks. Did you know I knew Ford? Not until I was getting you on your feet, Stan says. I put 2 and 2 together from there. I thought about looking for Ford, that he might be in the city with you, but... God. Oh my God. I'm so close to being done, but I cannot keep this gruffness up. Oh my God. I don't know what to do instead. Okay, Kelly. This is going to be delayed. So, are you okay if I just talk like this for the rest of the time as Stan? It's going to be in this voice. This is my new Stan voice, because I cannot keep doing that gruff. Oh my God. Okay. You're not answering my question. Bill's brow is furrowed. He pushes himself up on an elbow. You didn't know me. You don't know me. You just, saw a guy in an alleyway and turned into a saint? Well, Stan looks away, grimaces. Come on, it ain't that hard to figure out. I'm a crook, but I'm not gonna let some crybaby. I am not some big, blubbering crybaby freeze to death in an alley when I finally got a place with decent heating, all right? I've been the guy on the ground before. It blows. Nothing more to it. This is so stupid. Bill stares at him for another moment, too confused to be angry and too irritated to come to any kind of conclusion about what Stan's saying. He thinks about a lot of things he could say all at once, and the resulting chatter in his head is overwhelming. His vision unfocuses. He feels sluggish and exhausted even as his pulse increases. Thank you, Kelly. What if he knew something about you? Asks a voice in the back of his skull. Come on, this is Stan Pines we're talking about. He wouldn't just... You know something, right? Why should I believe that? Bill manages, rolling over on the recliner to face away from Stan. Pretty shaky explanation, Stanley. Fine, you got me, Stan says. I was gonna pick up your dumb dead pockets. Happy? This is so fucking stupid. Bill clams his teeth down before a laugh, half genuine and half hysterical, can escape. He hates himself for it a moment later, but the mortification settles in his skull and bleeds into his chest as the bare fabric of the chair imprints itself on his face. Sleepless nights are taking their toll. The movie prattles on in the background, and Bill can feel drool catching at the edge of his lip. He tries to bite his tongue and clench his fists to stay awake, but the awful rusting recliner with smoke stains on each armrest drags him down toward the darkness minute by minute. Do not fall asleep. Not here. Not when he's behind... He thinks, then that voice is extinguished too. Ford saved my life first, he murmurs, petulant. What? Stan asks, a touch of genuine befuddlement in his voice. Wait, what'd you? The darkness that fills Bill's vision is soft and merciful. He forgets everything, the cold, the betrayal, twins and portals and cults, and loses consciousness. For the first time in weeks, he is warm when he falls asleep. Bill stirs for a few seconds. He doesn't know how much time has passed, but the TV is off, and the only light in the room comes from the Why can I not say words? The winter moon that looms through the window. His vision focuses through narrowed eyes on the darkness in front of him. The sofa, the can-strewn coffee table, The clock on the far wall, the figure at the foot of the recliner, dark as pitch. Stanley, standing over him, holding something. Bill wants to jump to his feet, to run out the door and into the night. He can't. He freezes like a prey animal, heart pounding, cold in the shadow that blankets his sleeping form. His body doesn't respond to his commands. He's paralyzed and shivering, locked in while his mind runs itself to pieces. He knows. He knows! Laughs some hysterical, delirious part of his brain. He knows you're a goddamn demon who used his brother like a tool and he's going to do what he did to you in another lifetime, punk. You fell asleep. You let your guard down. That's your fault. Stan steps toward him, and the footstep is dull and heavy in the carpet at his feet. He reaches out with his hand, his 5 fingers cutting black slashes in the moonlight, and Bill shuts his eyes tight in anticipation of a blow. He exhales. The sound is quiet but painful. There you go, Stan says, asshole. Bill's exhaustion muffles the sound of his voice. He sounds far away, and he doesn't sound angry or vengeful or anything close. Something falls over Bill, solid, dry, and warm. By the time Bill realizes he's not going to die, the man has already retired to his bedroom, clicking the lock behind him. Bill lies awake for another 5 minutes, brain on fire, trying to rationalize what's happening to him. Maybe he died out there in the alley, and maybe this is hell, and he hasn't realized it yet. In the end, he stops thinking about anything but the weight of the familiar coat around him. He knows he's imagining the smell of pine, and he does not care. Bill dreams for the 1,000th time that he's in Ford's bed again. He can feel Ford's arms around him, the rise and fall of the man's chest. It's such a perfect feeling that Bill doesn't trust it. He knows where he really is, that he's in some nowhere town hundreds of miles from Ford. He's not even in the guy's head. The exhaustion of his human body actually affects his ability to enter the mindscape. Months of stupid, normal dreams, all because he can get a solid bite to eat. You've got a meal in you, he thinks, with a sad and sick kind of hope. What if it's different this time? But he doesn't move. Not yet. If he's right, he could visit Ford tonight, undo the damage wrought by that hick, and the bag of Blackwing bones pulling his strings. He doesn't know how he'd convince Ford yet, but Fiddleford wouldn't be there to ruin things. Ford would listen to reason, wouldn't he? Or he'd tell the engineer that Bill had climbed into his head and have a mind-shielding metal plate installed around his skull before sunrise. Either or. Bill sighs into the soft, hazy fabric of the pillow. It feels incredible. Everything feels real and lucid and flawless, but the mere knowledge that he isn't really with Ford is ruining everything. He rolls over inch by inch until he faces the man holding him, his mind's reconstruction of his author, perfect to every minute detail. The man sleeps on his side, with his lips parted and his features soft. When he feels Bill's breath on his throat, one corner of his mouth turns upward in his sleep. The sound of the wind blowing outside is broken by the call of some unfamiliar bird. Bill could move, but he doesn't. He wonders how much of Ford's reaction here is realistic and how much of it is his own perception of the guy. A smile? Yeesh. You want him to smile at you? Shut up, he tells the needling voice in his head. Now. Bro. And then he hears another voice under the wind in the bird song. It's not Fiddleford, and it's not anyone else in Gravity Falls. It's familiar at an instant, even though he feels like he hasn't heard it in ages. His brow furrows as he tries to place it. As he strains to hear it again, he even wonders if he imagined it. If it were some quirk of his human mind's chemistry his power couldn't account for. For a few more seconds or minutes, he thinks about ignoring it. What he should really do is wake himself up and run like hell. He needs to get away from Stan before the guy catches wise or figures out who or what Bill is. Sure, there isn't any real reason to fear the guy. And Bill doesn't, but there's always the chance that he'll somehow get a call or a card from Ford. Sixer managed to track his worthless drifter of a brother down in another life. Who says he couldn't do it in this one? But he doesn't wake himself up because he doesn't want to leave this room, and Bill, selfish as ever, doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. The voice gets louder in a subtle way, increasing just enough that Bill can make out a word, his name. Bill's brow furrows, and this time he picks up his head up off the pillow. He knows he's heard it before, and the knowledge scratches at his mind like a crawling insect. When he hears his name again, clearer than ever, he sits up and looks back down at Ford in the same motion. He reaches out, ruffles the man's hair, and wills him to stay asleep. Then he gets up and walks toward the door. Oh. Outside, just beyond the threshold, the starry fabric of the mindscape stretches out into eternity. Bill narrows his eyes against a horizon that does not exist and sees a pinprick of rosy white light. It's brighter than a star, and it flickers and moves in erratic flourishes. Bill takes a step forward and walks toward it through an open space like he's on solid ground. It takes a moment to occur to him that there is no reason for him to be walking there. He hovers, then moves forward, speeding up by exponential factors as he goes. Space warps and buckles to accommodate him. He can feel the pain and terror of being human draining away as he moves, sloughing off in the absence of physical sensation. There is no wind to brace against in the mindscape, but he narrows his eyes anyway. The voice is becoming clearer. His mouth falls open when he recognizes who's waiting for him. The figure in front of him, now just a dozen or so meters away, is easily thrice his height. She's always been, but the difference only occurs to him right now. If he weren't floating right now, he'd come up to her mid-thigh at most. Her single eye is closed tight, and she holds an object that looks like a tiny particle accelerator made out of glitter, pressing and releasing tiny buttons in a complex pattern. She radiates heat like a blast furnace, but it isn't uncomfortable. It's almost soothing here. Bill remembers what Janie said all those months ago in a little corner booth at a diner packed with his cultists. She'd known about gravity falls because she'd met someone in her sleep, someone who was looking for Bill. With the quick flailing of his arms, Bill comes to a halt in front of his favorite hench thing, hovering just high enough to meet her eye. Pyronica? He blurts, voice echoing despite the total lack of walls around him. What the fuck are you doing here? She opens her eye with a start, and her mouth twists into a frown at the sight in front of her. She tilts her head, and the flames that cover her arms and legs flare in her confusion. A moment later, her mouth and her an eye widen in shock, and she sets the glowing device at her feet. Bill? She asks, a small and disbelieving smile on her face. Who else, Toots? He asks, a grin blooming across his face. How the hell are you? Pyronica bursts into laughter before he can continue. Bill blinks, surprised, and in the space of half a second, Pyronica has stepped forward and grabbed him under the arms. She holds him up and lets his legs dangle, waving him from side to side. Oh, jeez, Bill! She cackles, bringing him closer to inspect him. What are you wearing? Or who? Is this another one of those totally not a corpse possessions? A moment of confusion gives way to sudden potent embarrassment. Bill gives her a sheepish smile, then snaps his fingers and returns to the form she's more accustomed to, 60 degrees that come in threes, and all that. She moves back as a change occurs and lets her hold slacken. She's here, the real her, after all of this time, unchanged as ever. Bill feels an inexplicable giddiness. On impulse, he moves forward to throw his arms around her. Boy, am I glad to see you, he says, extending his arms to wrap around her thrice. Took you long enough. How's my number one party girl? When he pulls away, Pyronica's eyes is wide with a surprise. She steps back, her smile faltering. It returns a moment later, as white and as perfect as ever. Well, I don't know what I was expecting when I found you again, she says, but it definitely wasn't that. Oh, Bill realizes it as he starts to reply. He hugged her like a human would. It didn't feel the same, not in this form and in the mindscape, but he'd done it like he'd been doing it all his life. Gotta keep you on your toes, hot stuff. Bill, he says, snapping his fingers. The laugh it elicits from her tells him that she buys it. She still moves away, hands on her hips, eyes flicking across his form like she expects it to change at any moment. Her face all smooth pink plasma and white light is impossible for him to read. This is the first time Bill has ever been bothered by that. Right. Of course you... Wait. Right. Of course you... Anyway, she shakes her head, hair drifting across her forehead like magma in low gravity. I didn't want to bug you, seriously, but you left without saying anything, right? And you have no idea how hard it is to keep these scrubs happy. It's been to keep these scrubs happy. Kehoe whines when we ask him to get anything for dinner. Can you guys give me money? As though he can't just kill the guy who runs the restaurant. I have to do everything when you're gone. And don't get me started on hectagons. Hey, Pyronica, Bill interjects. I need to ask you. Whole complex about why I dumped him, as though I didn't spend a century unpacking why I don't see him like that anymore. A literal century. Like, you'd think he would have gotten the message around year 90. Pyronica. 3. But no, he wants to ask me why in the middle of a heist. Heists suck now, by the way. I keep telling them to stick to the cipher heist template you gave us, but they're convinced they can do something new or whatever. Cryptos acts like you put him in charge. So I tried to talk to him about it, but he wanted to act like you and had this whole conversation where you gave him full reign to do all the dumb Pyronica! And then, like he intended, he has all her attention. Bill's voice resonates in the mindscape. He doesn't intend for it to resound like a gunshot in an elevator, but it does. He grows, or perhaps she shrinks. The world around them darkens as a flash of blue fire licks up around Bill's form, lining him in impossible shades of blue. Pyronica steps back, her own fire dimming, like a puppy seeing a thunderstorm. And an instant later, Bill is his usual size again. Form quivering, arms held at right angles, surprised at himself. Pyronica stares in silence, mouth closed back straight. He realizes that he has seen this particular expression on her face before, and on the faces of every member of the crew. She's frightened. Of him. Sorry, she says, all the brassy exuberance gone from her voice. Sorry, Bill. No, I mean... Bill trails off, blinks, tries to remember what he was going to say. It's fine, really. She smiles in a cringing, conciliatory way. I wasn't thinking, right? I was being. It's fine. You're fine, he says, voice firm. Pyronica stares at him for another few seconds before the smile returns to her face, more tremulous, but still it returns. Bill makes it sound like he's clearing his throat, even though he can't do that in this form. Is anybody watching? Hello? Even though he can't do that in this form, he doesn't know why he feels like he's nauseous without a digestive system to explain the sensation. She works for me, he thinks, as though he's justifying himself to someone. Woof. Talk about a weird time to meet, he says. And really, I want to catch up, honest. But I have to ask you how the hell you found me here, sister, or the suspense is gonna kill me. Pyronica's lips part, a beat, and then the smile on her face is wide and genuine again. Do you mean in the mindscape? Of course I mean in the mindscape, Bill says, throwing his arms up. Are you here because of that weird thing you were holding? What the hell is that box? Is that how you're here? And where did you get it? Get it? She asks, a note of mock offense in her voice. Bill, I freaking made it! What? I'm literally a quantum physicist, she says, deadpan. You knew that when I joined the crew. Bill realizes he did know that. It's just the kind of thing you forget when your primary relationship with someone involves reigning as their erstwhile god emperors of the hellish space between all dimensions. It figures that someone of her caliber could crack dream travel, even if she couldn't make the portal herself. She'd love to talk to Ford, huh? He thinks, with a tiny ugly twinge. Well, she's Pyro Brainiac, he says. Way to make a guy feel silly for asking. Oh, you're still. Hi, Kelly. She opens her mouth and closes it. Her smile is dazzling. You're not silly, she shrugs and shifts from foot to foot. I probably seem pretty dumb, though, right? A pause. Bill tries to figure out what she means. Come again? Come again? I swear, I'm not trying to be all up in your business, Bill, she blurts. It's just that you usually tell me where you're going when you take a little trip, not assuming anything, but sorry, I thought you'd probably be annoyed at me for bothering you. Bothering me? He scoffs. Why would I? The answer strikes him all at once. It's only been a year since he appeared in Gravity Falls, an infinitesimal fraction of his life or even of Pyronica's. She isn't immortal, not like him, but she's long-lived and powerful. They've known each other for eons upon eons. Wouldn't she feel embarrassed going looking for him? Dialing him on the trans-dimensional phone after a handful of months, she was probably expecting him to roll his eyes and call her clingy. He would have, in another timeline. Hold on a second. Sorry, I got a text. He would have, in another timeline, probably would have chucked her out of the mindscape and told her to get him some takeout for when he got back. Not this time. Not this one. Bill missed her. She wasn't at the forefront of his mind, and he didn't miss all of his crew members, but he missed her like, well, a friend. Some part of his brain wanted her to find him, ever since he had heard she was somehow in the mindscape long enough to talk to Janie. The thought makes him feel detached from himself. 1 year has felt so, so long. If you keep being all nice to me, I'm gonna think you're not the real Bill, she jokes. You'd better not be into me either. There's enough of that in the crew as it is. Bill laughs. He still feels strange, but it's nice that he can do this with her again. Trust me, he says. Not an issue. A spark of interest in her eye. Bill realizes he needs to move on and move on quickly. Hey, before I go back to my business, he says, waving a hand in a vague circle. Did you run into anyone named Janie lately? Janie? Oh, yeah, Pyronica says, smacking her forehead with a hand. Just the other day. The cute little human with the brown hair and the brown eyes, right? Janie x Pyronica? It's been months, Bill thinks, queasy once again. For a moment, the mindscape brightens. The stars in the distance are growing hazier. That's how most humans look. Sure, probably. Bill says, she knew me, right? Oh, yeah, one of your old groupies from the Silas thing. Pyronica nods, enthused. I told her some of my theories about where you might be, if you were still all about Earth. The Bermuda Triangle, or that little town in Gravity Falls? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that one. I told her to tell me if she found you. Bill raises his brow. Did she? Well, one issue with this thing, Pyronica sighs and shakes her invention, and the dream shivers in response. It's imprecise. Super imprecise, actually. I've talked to a bunch of humans, and most of them just freak out because I'm gorgeous and big enough to smush them like little bugs. They do that, Bill says, defeated. They do that a lot. I only managed to talk to her one more time, and I only got like 30 seconds with her before she woke up. I haven't been able to talk to her since. Bill brightens. His form hums, and he floats so that he's inches from Pyronica's face. He can hear strange sounds entering the dream inch by inch, a buzzing, the sound of wind. What did she say? You're getting harder to hear, Pyronica says, squinting, fiddling with her box. I think I can keep this dream going. Let me fiddle with this for a sec. Py, just tell me what she said, please. Please, he says. I'm gonna wake up, and I need to know. You have no idea what I... She said she was waiting for you, Pyronica says, bemused. You know, usual culty stuff. Can't you just stay here? Why are you... Where? Bill asks, grabbing Pyronica's shoulders. Please, tell me where she said... Please, tell me she said where. Well, she said... Pyronica takes a moment to think. Bill feels the mindscape fading around him, feels his heart pounding in his human form's chest somewhere in the real world. She's taking too long, because she's still immortal and thinks he is too. She thinks they have eternity, and Bill doesn't. For the first time in existence, Bill is well and truly running out of time. She said something weird, Pyronica finishes, trying to hold Bill's jittering hand. She said, what happens in The dream falls apart like tissue paper set aflame. Cold white light punctures the sky, and Bill closes his eye to shield it from the glare. Pyronica watches, lips parted, as he is forced from the dream by the waking of his real body. The last thing he sees in the dream is her reaching for him, then stopping short, remembering herself. His sensation returns in a rush. The blue early morning moonlight through the window is shining on his face, reflected in a single harsh rectangular beam by powder snow on the roof of a neighboring shed. He lurches to a sitting position, gasping, shrinking back on himself like a child waking from a nightmare, even as one hand flies forward. He sits like that, arm outstretched, for almost 30 seconds. He lets his hand fall, and then in the dark, as his mind races, Bill starts to smile. It was close there, for a second. He can still feel the adrenaline rush of waking, seeing Pyronica for the first time in a while. His hands are shaking as he folds them around his chest, rocking back and forth in place in his excitement. It doesn't matter if his heart is beating in his chest and he feels nauseous with emotions he can't name. He got what he needed, thank you very much, and he knows what he's going to do. Bill gets up, takes a deep breath, and heads toward the kitchen. He whistles an old country song under his breath. Stan wakes up with a headache. He glances through half-lidded eyes at the locked door of his bedroom. It's intact, which means that his brother's basket case couldn't have picked the lock. Stan's valuables are safe, even if said valuables consists of a pair of car keys and a wad of wrinkled $20 bills. He's got it. He's got to be gone, Stan thinks. Guy was eyeing the door all night. Whatever Ford told him, it must have been a hell of a story. Bill, that was the name the guy gave him at least, looked like a cornered animal every time Stan made eye contact, cowering to whatever seat he was using as his lip curled and his body tensed. Maybe it was just some hard living that made him, well, jumpy. But Stan didn't think so. He looked downright scared most of the time. If he hadn't, Stan would have put up with the smartass. Part of him regrets not doing more to keep him in the house. His first link to Stanford in years, and it's this freak, a skin and bone scientist with eerie mismatched eyes and a bizarre tattoo on his chest. Stan's known occultists before, from new age hippies to the kinds of real weirdos you only meet as a drifter, but he's never seen someone get the eye on the dollar bill into their chest. Stan rolls onto his side to face the door better, yawns and grimaces. The taste of beer has fouled in his throat. He reaches for a cigarette to clear it, sniffling. When he does, he freezes at what he smells. Eggs! The smell of cooking eggs. With a start, he kicks the covers off his bed and reaches for his bathrobe. It's ratty and red, but it'll do for now. He yanks it over the boxers and tank top he fell asleep in and makes his way to the front door, fumbling with the lock as he tries to rationalize what his nose is telling him. There's no way, he thinks. The guy could barely stand. But when he emerges into the kitchen, he hears the telltale sizzle of a spatula scraping a cast iron and an off-tune whistle. He turns toward the god-awful stove of his one-bedroom apartment, mouth hanging open, and sees Bill standing there with his back turned. The eggs look terrible but edible. Bill is scraping them from the pan, whistling, nursing a tiny red burn mark on one hand as his hair escapes its rubber band ponytail. When he hears Stan emerge from this room, he turns around with a toothy grin on his face. Stan almost shivers. Man, this guy's gaze gives him the creeps. He's not sure how his brother can stand it, if this man is telling the truth. Then again, he seemed too nervous to not be telling at least half of it last night. Morning, sunshine! Bill flips a fried egg so badly that it lands on his other hand. Want to make a lot of money? And just like that, Stan feels the world shift around him. His pupils widen, and the room is suffused with a tender yellow light. Even as suspicion wells in his chest, he feels the silent back of the throat rush of rolling hot in craps, or counting his way to a blackjack victory without being caught. He forces a poker face and rolls out the muscles in his neck. "I'm listening," he says, and somehow Bill's grin widens even further. Wow. That was the end. The end of chapter 28. Wow. That was great. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for joining me. I can always rely on you, Kelly. Number one wrencher, Kelly. Kelly, you are the GOAT. Yeah, Kelly. I'm gonna end the live stream, but yeah, thank you again, Kelly, for being here and sticking around for the whole thing. Oh my gosh, you're here like almost every single one so far, and I'm really happy and I really appreciate it. But I'll talk to you later in the Wrencher server. Oh my god.